It is 9 minutes past 9. And actually, I wasn't late for my court appearance this morning. Perhaps should have been. I perhaps shouldn't even have turned up. Yeah. In all seriousness. In all seriousness. I come from a generation, like most of you who have joined me this evening, I come from a generation of where we had nothing but the utmost of respect for the police. And in the scheme of things, my interactions with Greater Manchester Police and how they've behaved and they're continuing to behave is really an irrelevance compared to what the police have done to others. And I'm not anti-police. I've never been anti-police. I have friends who are police officers. I have people I consider to be family who are police officers. And I've worked with the police for many generations. And across the board, particularly in Greater Manchester, across the board, frontline police officers are actually more outraged than any of us as to the murky dealings between senior officers and corrupt police. Corrupt politicians, sorry. And they are leaving in record numbers. Police officers are leaving Greater Manchester Police in record numbers. And why? Well, in London today, and this is why I take what is done to me and just shrug my shoulders, because I know it could be worse. Because today in London, it is the 1-year anniversary of where a serving police officer whose previous criminal actions had been repeatedly covered up by an equally corrupt police force, went looking for a woman who he kidnapped off the street, raped and murdered. That is what the police in this country now is. They protected that Cousins bloke, and today is the 1-year anniversary, and do you know what happened? The IOPC, that's the so-called Independent Police Complaints or whatever it is. It's a joke of an organisation. Clearly forced to investigate one of their own police officers kidnapping, raping and murdering a young woman on the streets of our capital. What the IOPC are now saying, and this just demonstrates how not fit for purpose those that lead the police force are across this country of ours. They are claiming that the Met made errors. Errors. Oh, they weren't errors. The Met covered it up And just as the Met covered it up in London, so too a greater... And I say this consistently and repeatedly, and they hate it, don't you, Detective Sergeant Christopher Dean and Detective Inspector Kenny Blaine, the gatekeeper? Hate it because you guys, the Greater Manchester Police, are now proven paedophile protectors.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011, he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.
So, remember the scandal? Of course you remember the scandal in Rotherham. Child abuse scandal. Sammy Woodhouse and all of those remarkable ladies fighting for so many years now. And when the scandal, when the J report took place and it all emerged, just like in Greater Manchester Police a few years afterwards, and I'm going to Rotherham for a reason, because the patterns are just repeated. So expect the same pattern to be repeated here unless we are prepared to do something differently. In Rotherham, their IOPC, or whatever they're called, got involved and did their investigation. 7-year misconduct probe. 7 years. I'll just read it here. A 7-year misconduct probe. Do you know how many police officers were sacked in Rotherham after 7 years? Zero. Not a single police officer was sacked after 7 years. The misconduct probe in Rotherham. Not a single police officer. It was leaked on the late November last year, just before Christmas. You know, because they like to bury news, bad news just before Christmas. It was leaked. Not a single police officer would be sacked. And so, we move forward to the proven paedophile protectors at Greater Manchester Police, Operation Augusta. Proven 97 child sex offenders, at least 97 child sex offenders, were allowed to go about their business. Their business being picking up, drugging, injecting with drugs, getting them drunk, children, gang raping them and selling them to their mates. So we're clear what their business was. And the police, Greater Manchester Police, turned a blind eye. They facilitated the systematic grooming and gang rape of our children. And in the minutes of the meeting where the operation was pulled, the minutes mysteriously disappeared. The police apparently couldn't find them, and neither could the council. And fast forward to Oldham, and what has been leaked so far from Burnham's report is that the police are specifically named. They won't name any police officers, don't be stupid, but the police, Greater Manchester Police, are specifically named for having covered up child abuse. Greater Manchester Police are currently in accelerated special measures. The report that came out this morning shows them to be in such a mess that less than 8 out of 100 crimes result in any form of action, or 8 out of 100 crimes result in any form of action. And not are they not only incapable of looking after the public, they're incapable of looking after their own staff. This is Greater Manchester Police. So my saga, in the context of police officers handing over a child to be gang raped, mine's a complete insignificance. And the only people it is now significant to are those who wish to silence me or discredit me. The only ones left who believe there is any mileage in pursuing me are the bent police officers like Detective Sergeant Christopher Dean and Detective Inspector Kenny Blaine. The only ones left are those bent police officers that every other decent police officer despises. Those slimy careerists that sell their own mother, never mind one of their colleagues, to progress their careers. The only ones left is a strange coalition of heroin dealers, politicians, and a malicious blogger. So when I rocked up at court this morning, and thank you to all of you who sent me well wishes. When I rocked up to court this morning, on time, because we taught on time, aren't we? My hearing was at 9:30, so I was there at just after 9 o'clock. Sat around and waited a couple of hours. To be told that I would go to the back of the queue because they had to deal with custodial people first. I presume that meant people who were arrested the night before. And what happened was, I look up and I hear his voice first. I've no idea who he was talking to. But Warren Bates rocks up. So Warren Bates rocks up. And he kept me company for a couple of hours. And he came in. He actually came into the hearing with me when it finally happened. But, so he sat there. And the usher comes along. And tries to... and I'd been told beforehand that it wasn't open to the public. But I could take someone with me. are the rules. But from the beginning of me attending, you know when you go to a place and you can feel angst towards you and you just smile. So the usher rocks up. Is he a relative? Warren Bates, me? Is he a relative? Yeah, says Warren. He's a relative. So she looks and walks off. Actually, he didn't need to be a relative, but that's by the by. And my solicitor rocks up, calls me into a room, and I have a conversation. And I wait another hour, and I go into the courtroom. And remember, this is meant to be a case management hearing where the dossier of evidence is presented. Oh, Detective Sergeant. Detective Sergeant, how high do you think you're going to go, Christopher Dean? Do you think they were laughing behind your back at Tameside Police Station? Because I'd be laughing in front of you, mate. Never mind behind your back. And I do hope it gets to court. But it wasn't going to get to court anytime soon. Do you know why it wasn't going to get to court anytime soon? In this country, there's a legal process. As comedy as my experiences have been over the last 7 or 8 months of this legal process, in this country, there's a legal process. So, when I'm arrested, then I'm charged, then I face trial. And usually what happens is, what you get arrested for, the offences you get arrested for, is what you're charged for, and that's what you face trial for. Is that sequence straightforward? I am not. I'm a stranger to courtrooms, but I've seen, I've watched Taggart on telly. So what you're arrested for and what you're charged for is what you face trial for. Are you following? Detective Sergeant Christopher Dean and his numpty mates from Tameside Police Station submitted a dossier of evidence to the CPS relating to offences I've not been charged for, never mind face trial for. That's right. Detective Sergeant Christopher Dean, the bent paedophile protecting, bent politician protecting GMP, yeah? No, the best of GMP. If that's the best of GMP, that bent sod submitted evidence, and my solicitor's laughing or trying to keep a straight face. The CPS woman gets up, and she's only a young lass. She gets up and says, "It's a very complicated case, this." I said, "Yeah, it's a very," and I'm thinking to myself, in the dark, "Yeah, it's a very complicated case because you bent police officers are trying to stitch me up and I'm not having any of it." They presented a case file. Making reference to crimes, offences have not been charged for. And also, offences have not been ever questioned for. 8 months, 7 months, 8 months. Do I look scared of those clowns? In accelerated special measures, remember. In accelerated special measures, bent. Absolutely bent. But it gets even more funnier. none of this seems to want to work today, so give me a second. Let me just try this again. Here we go. Just give me a second. How desperate is he? How desperate is Willow Boobies? Forget the courts, Julie. How desperate is this guy? So, disgraced activist Raja Mir, who routinely shows absolutely no respect for the law. No, I respect the law. What I have no respect for is corruption. With a prima facie admission of contempt of court, to which both he and self-admitted public nuisance Warren 9 whatever are a party. Warren rocked up to say hello. Taking photographs within any court precinct is strictly prohibited. As is my duty. As is my duty. The matter has been reported to the Attorney General. Ideas above his station. Ideas above his station. The Attorney General. HMCTS.gov UK. I presume that's the courts. And Greater Manchester Police. Followed by some nonsense. And of course, the runt of the family Mushtaq has to join in. I walked Warren back to the tram stop, and we had a cup of coffee in Costa. A cup of coffee in Costa. The picture was from Costa Coffee. How desperate are these guys getting? How much more desperate are they getting? The photographs from Costa Coffee. Warren bought me a latte. And then proceeded to share his age with anyone else who looked remotely of a similar age to he did. He's reported me to the Attorney General. Man, do I look like I give a shit? Do I look like I give a shit what a bunch of bent coppers, a malicious blogger, and the runt of a Mushtaq family is trying to do to me? I'm back in court next month. The magistrate was angry. I think she was also angry that I answered her back. Oh, that's what. It also gets worse. It gets worse. Not only had they not submitted the evidence they were meant to, evidence of the actual crime I'm facing charges for. You'll recall, those of you who came with me to my hearing, my plea hearing, you'll recall that my solicitor successfully separated both cases. So there were two trials, and there had to be two trials, two tried separately. The CPS hadn't got around to doing that yet, and we're still trying to put through both cases as one. And the best bit, you'll also recall that the case was to be heard by a district judge. Well, the courtroom I get into, there's two magistrates who look completely out of their depth because they were out of their depth. They weren't even supposed to be hearing the case. You know what the thing that isn't funny? This is costing us tens of thousands of pounds. This is costing us, you and me, tens of thousands of pounds. Trying to try me with a dossier linked to crimes I've not been charged for. With magistrates who've been determined are not of the sufficient level required to hear my trial, along with the failure to separate two cases. And then the funny bit, and Warren mentioned it, but well, any of you have met Warren. And I don't know what party Warren belongs to, but I'll get to that in a minute. He was entertaining, by the way. 2 hours I was sat outside, and if it weren't for Warren, I would have probably made my way through the vending machine. What Warren? So Warren sat in the back taking notes. I'm stood in the dock, and the magistrate, who can see me on the verge of this, is trying to be stern. Your bail conditions are, and you will not. So I look at her. I said, well, I haven't. You've had me on bail for like 7 months. I've not broke any conditions, so what are you on about? And you have to come back on this date, and if you don't come back, we'll send someone to arrest you. Why would you send someone to arrest me? I've come today. I've come out every occasion, and I'm looking forward to coming next time. Sorry, am I not treating this with the level of seriousness it should be? Greater Manchester Police are a joke. It's not me saying this. It's their own inspectors saying it. They're a joke. The proven paedophile protectors, proven corrupt. And sorry, the court system, the more I see it, the more I think it's a complete joke. And I wish I was getting a jury, Denise. I wish I was getting a jury, but I'm not yet. I'm not yet. Apparently I'm meant to get a district judge. So I leave. Warren and I go for a walk. He buys me a coffee. And you know what Warren's like. I'm going to put a photograph up of Warren and I in the coffee shop. And then a friend of mine sends me that picture from Wilby. Oh, we've got to get him on something. We've got to get him on something. Oh, I've done my duty. I've reported him to the Attorney General. Yes, I speak with marbles in my mouth. I've a journalist card, don't you know? Yes, I've reported him to the Attorney General. He was having a coffee in Costa. And Mustang Runt sidekick. Yeah, yes. And I wanted to fight him in a boxing match and he wouldn't come and fight me. Dickhead. So I'm back next month. Jack, where you been? You've reported me to the Attorney General for taking a photograph with Warren Bates. from the Costa coffee shop and not the courtroom. Every time I see him, I think of is it Bad Boys the movie? And I'm Mike Lowry, and he just wants to be like me. Well, he's a masquerading as a solicitor, isn't he? Listen. I look forward. DS Christopher Dean, are you watching? Are you and your mates at that bent GMP watching? Come on. What are you waiting for? Bring on the trial. I'm here. My town is here. We're all going to rock up and we're all going to demonstrate to people across the entire nation what a bunch of paedophile protecting bent politician scumbags Greater Manchester Police are. Which gets me to something serious. Interfering with elections is a serious crime, isn't it? Interfering with elections is a serious crime, isn't it, Mr. and Mrs. Policemen who are listening to me? In a desperate bid to prevent Mark Wilkinson being elected as a Failsworth independent, the Labour Party knew that they would have to split the Failsworth independent vote. And so they backed Warren Bates. Now, encouraging Warren is one thing. But the Labour Party went further. The Labour Party paid for Warren Bates's election publicity. That is unlawful. That is illegal. And so we're clear. The candidate in Failsworth facing Mark Wilkinson was Sean Fielding, the former leader of Oldham Council. Do you think he's going to get a 6 a.m. raid in his house, in his posh flat in Salford? No. We all know what's going on in this town. We all know the role I play. And we all know how desperate they are to try and silence me. I intentionally avoided the council meeting yesterday, commenting on it, saying anything, sharing it. It's because I wanted you all who watched it or followed it to see what a joke it is, how disorganized the opposition are, and the clarity I help provide, and how I galvanize a growing number of people in this town who want nothing more than to wrestle control of our town back from a bunch of paedophile protecting politicians and fake liberal elite council officers. So, we move forward towards the election. Purda starts April. There's a month to go before Purdah kicks in. And that grooming gang report is nowhere to be seen. It's not being published. And if it isn't being published before the election, there can be, as far as I'm concerned, there can be only one reason why. It will be damaging to Oldham Labour. If the opposition parties are genuinely opposition, and I no longer believe, I never believed anyway, but I do not believe the Liberal Democrats are, two sides of the same postal vote, is Howard Sykes and AROOJ SHAH. If we are to beat them, the Failsworth Independents need to up their game. I heard what happened to Brian Hoban yesterday, and I heard how he reacted. What did you expect? Did you really think going for a curry, I think it was, not a coffee, and having your picture took and cozying up to her was going to get you the desired outcome? You just got played. Learn and move on. The Conservatives, well, they're in a joke of a position to Saddleworth lot, aren't they? But there are seats we can take. And over the coming weeks, I will be hosting regular transmissions, giving you insights into each of the wards and the candidates. And I'll also be taking to the streets with our own Recusant leaflets, because this is a democracy, and in a democracy I am allowed to campaign. There is nothing in my bail conditions that prevent me from campaigning, is the Detective Sergeant Christopher Dean. As for witness intimidation, not at all interested. I can't wait for this to get to court. I can't wait for this to get to court. My name is Raja Mia. I look forward to catching you all soon. Maybe drop the Attorney General an email or a tweet if you're on Twitter and warn him about the nutcase who wants to report people for drinking coffee in Costa. Oh, and if you don't follow this channel, please do follow the channel. And if you're of a mind to, do buy me a coffee. That'll only send him even more crazy. A very good night.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.